and comfortable.
Hello and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Creatives. I am Maddox, and today we have a special guest, none other than my co-host, Dwight Spencer, is our featured guest today.
Hey, great to be with everybody.
We're going to get to hear Dwight's his journey, his story. So, Dwight, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're about.
Sure. I am a Dallas native. I was born in Parkland Hospital and spent my life in the mid cities and got to enjoy all of the things that came with being in suburbia. My parents did the best for me that they could. I had a rather strange experience with what it was to grow up in a way that I was always kind of the odd man out. And the communities I was in Grand Prairie, I grew up in and around very religious circles. I went to private schools, and as a result, I was the only black face in a crowd. And so that led to some interesting perspectives. And of course, I found myself in that awkward position of being the black guy in the white crowd. And because I always hung around with the white kids, when I find myself in black spaces, I was always seen as a little different. So I spent a lot of time on my own. I read quite a bit and kind of lost myself in fiction and just trying to figure out what it would be like to just go off into other worlds. Spend a lot of time in nature. Spend a lot of time as a child writing a lot of adventures and things that I don't know. I may pick up again someday, but I had a very rich, colorful internal world, and I still do to some degree. It just manifests a little differently. Of course, childhood was abruptly ended by having to enter the work world a little early. And it ultimately culminated in an enlistment from 98 to 2002, coming back to land in the Dallas Fort Worth area again, and eventually working for a large company that serves local government. And I've done that for quite a long time, and it's brought me a lot of joy because it's allowed me to help people through problems and try to figure out creative avenues for being able to just make things work. So that's me.
Great. You mentioned a couple of things that I think I want to ask how they fit together.
Yeah.
You said that a lot of your early years were kind of feeling like you didn't fit in or othered,
Yeah.
and um, and then you made the comment that you developed a very rich inner world, and I'm wondering how those two together. I mean, you're talking about a form of creativity, that inner world. And I'm wondering if that was in response to not feeling like you fit in, not, that othered part. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Um, One thing that was really hard to get away from was just the way that I immediately looked different from the people that surrounded me. And I could not help but feel judged or be reminded at every turn that I was unique in a lot of ways. And as I was as a little kid, there were ways that it just didn't make sense. And then I could, once I was old enough to kind of get a sense of what it was to be picked on, there were opportunities where anytime I was the target of ridicule, it stung in ways that, maybe it shouldn't have as much, but it really hurt because the places that I grew up in were so small and isolated. So every little interaction was magnified. And I guess where it hurt the most was there were times when uh, my parents were very young. Um, when I would share with them the things that were coming up for me where I was feeling picked on, their response was to kind of listen, but also kind of continue to pick on me. And that's some of my earliest memories as a child. And I got the message that, well, a lot of these things that don't feel so good, I should just keep to myself and just figure out a way to deal with it.
You talked about how it really stung and how hard it was to always be different. The
Mhm.
black face and all the white faces and the other ways that maybe made you stand out. Um, we live together. I'm your
Yeah,
your mate. So, I'm looking at it right now and thinking about how, in many ways, that hasn't changed.
sure.
We have a fairly rich social life, and although we try to build diversity in our social life as much as we can, in the art world, the Black community is under under
Underrepresented.
underrepresented. Thank you. I was going to say
Mhm.
underserved, and I knew that wasn't right. Yes, underrepresented, represented, and even in our own social life, we have a variety of different types of friends from different walks of life and certainly different races. But oftentimes, you're still uh, a black face in a lot of white faces, or maybe even like light
Yeah,
brown faces.
sure.
Um, so I'm thinking somehow you have gotten past the challenge of that because you never mention it being challenging now.
Well, it's not now. And there are a lot of ways that I remember some of the experiences I had as a teenager where it, I remember one thing that was modeled was that kids could be really cruel. And I can remember a string of movies that depicted what bullying was and what that was all about. I was fortunate in that I had such such a unique gift in the way that a lot of people adopted me as their their mascot or someone that was worthy of their protection. There were instances where an outsider might encounter me for the first time and think it was okay to treat me a little different. And just a little bit of background for color. Being from a family that was not of means, we had to do what we could to try to present well, but we had to do it with just being creative with how it was that we could make the most of whatever clothing we had. And so I was never one to follow trends. I had to carve out my own unique way of presenting, and it worked for me. I was a kid that stood out not just because I might have looked a little different than the demographic, but because I really looked different, and that would cause me to get some attention that from some people would be negative at first, but those that knew me would come to my side and be my protectors. And it was such a beautiful experience.
I find myself, as you say that, feeling envious because I did not have that. I did not have protectors growing up. The bullying was incessant, and is that the right word? Am I using the right
Yeah,
word?
no, it's perfect.
Incessant, and there was no protector. So you've kind of segued into where I wanted to go next. All of your experiences of being othered and being different. How did that impact your creative life?
It gave me fuel for being able to approach things from a completely different perspective. And I can recall being given the freedom uh, to just create in an assignment I had for a literature class. And it was one of those things where I was having a complete teacher's pet moment, but I was just given free rein to produce something. So I remember I was in I can't remember if it was middle school or high school, but I produced a play that had all sorts of uh, dark themes and very serious subject matter that uh, maybe was a little bit racy, but it was given a treatment that was made somehow okay and very well received, and everyone that got to experience it was they were on board. They went for the ride. They loved it, and no one in a community where I would expect people to be a little bit upset by anything that was not vanilla. Uh, no one had a harsh word to say about it.
Mm. Wow. So tell us, I mean, I know to some of this, but let's bring the audience into this in how does creativity show up for you? You know, because once again, I live with you. You don't paint, you don't create art, quote unquote, but you are a highly creative person because a lot of it happens inside your head.
Oh, a lot of it does. And yeah, I do have opportunities to allow it to get out at times. The biggest thing I struggle with is trying to tamp it down because I know that if I was to just let everything come out that's within me at any moment, it would be overwhelming. It would be unintelligible to someone on the outside. It would take so much effort to try to draw all of the threads together to make things work. But I can tap into the unique experience that I have of the world in such a way that I can make it to solutions that would otherwise seem out of reach, or I can see things in different ways and get to a conclusion that might take several iterations otherwise. And
So you're describing how creativity shows up for you.
yes, yeah, it's in a way that well, you got to see some of it displayed when we were with the family at Christmas time, and when we were playing some of the games, it was really hard for me because in some instances, when we were solving the word puzzles, I could immediately see with very few clues, okay, I've got the solution. But well, I have to go through, like I presented the solution to the very first clue when we were playing Wheel of Fortune, and there were two letters on the board, and it's like, okay, but we gotta go through and provide all of the letters because we only have so much time to solve the puzzle, and it would have taken more time to solve the puzzle than it would to just play through.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things, a lot of abstractions that just come easily for me. Like I can, there are a lot of ways when presented with an option, or if I'm said A or B, if I only have two options, then I wonder about all of the other solutions that I see and why they're not just as valid, because I can see both sides of the coin, but I can also see the ridges. They're just as real to me and just as powerful.
So are you describing what we would refer to as problem solving?
Problem solving is a big part of it, but I would say that it's also just a way of embracing uh, aspects of the world that are otherwise unseen, not considered.
Okay. And what aspect of the creativity that you experience, what are the things that light you up, that feed your soul?
Uh, I would say the biggest thing for me is having any experience where I can feel like there's a real sense of joy that comes from bonding, community, from sharing, from having a moment where someone can be completely who they are without fear of judgment and just knowing that they can be held and seen and appreciated.
Okay, so we're stepping away a little bit now from the problem solving aspects of creativity, and you're describing something else. Go into more detail.
Okay. Well, um, I think a lot of what I'm describing comes from my experience of growing up, largely as an only child. There were a lot of ways that, as an only child with limited, well, there were very few other children around me. I had to figure out how to entertain myself. And there were a lot of times when my parents, with in their pursuit of doing the things that they needed to do to support the family, they would leave me in childcare situations that were, I was either going with them or they would find some friends who might have also had children, usually a little older, that I would be around and I would have to still figure out how to entertain myself. And so as a child, I was as observant as any kid was and curious. I would pick up on things, but I guess bringing back to that theme of feeling picked on and othered, I remember how I will always hold on to how bad that felt. And I know that the last thing that I would ever want to do is make anyone feel unwelcome or to feel like they don't belong, because I've had experiences of that, enough experiences of that to last several lifetimes.
I hear you. So tell me a little bit more about how creativity shows up in that vein of bringing people together and community. And
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that has been an area of great interest for me has been uh, understanding how it is that we can better relate, what it is to ask better questions and to approach people with genuine interest. Because so much of what is modeled, so much of what people will naturally rely upon is really surface and really bad. And there's such a rich body of study that goes around how it is that people are activated. I fully appreciate that a person becomes completely activated when they're talking about themselves. And so that's something that I try to leverage, especially in a situation where I'm meeting someone new. I will engage them in such a way that I try to find out what their interests are, what drives them, what makes them happy, what are their hopes, their fears, their dreams, what it is that they're all about. It serves a purpose of helping to steer a narrative away from the things that we call polite conversation, the things that are safe. You know, the dreaded question, "What do you do?" And that only goes to bad places, because it's a throwaway question with a response that we probably don't even pay attention to, but the ways that we process it are ways that are full of judgment, and they make us kind of forget that the person in front of us is an actual human being that came from parents, or maybe they don't know their parents, or they may have some hobby that they're really into. If we don't give that person a chance to show us who they really are, then there's nothing that we can really latch onto, nothing that we can really probe to have a deeper appreciation of who they are.
Yes. And it's hard to have someone feel seen when you're on a surface level.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually on the surface, the inclination is to go through the polite script and then get away as soon as possible so that no one has to it doesn't leave you with a feeling uh, of being warm and fuzzy. It's more of a feeling of going through the exercise and hoping never to repeat it.
Yeah, I think that's what I often refer to as mental masturbation.
It's a great name for it.
Um, so aside from the challenges that you've already spoken of, is there any other thing of significance that has really challenged your creativity?
uh, um, I would say there is definitely a pattern that I've had to deal with over my life that's been one of wearing masks. I know that I needed to be careful to present in certain ways because my parents paved the way for me to go into certain places for my early education, and I learned when I would go in summer with my grandmother and go to the churches in East Texas that all of the ways that I had learned to be comfortable and okay with myself were not seen as okay. I was not uh, performatively black enough in some instances, and yeah, I was fortunate enough to feel secure enough in who I was to appreciate that a lot of what was what I viewed as being performatively black was something that was manufactured by a lot of white gatekeepers in Hollywood to be marketed to suburban white teens, most likely, to
Do
just to sell more stuff.
Given your experience, do you think that what you're describing right now, the performatively black, do you think that's something that others in your community will relate to?
I honestly do. I honestly do. I can point to some instances. I can remember an interview that I heard Diana Ross's daughter giving about how she was expected to uh, audition in certain ways that were inauthentic to her. And there was a point where once she knew she made it, she could speak out against that. And I think that's a very real way that through her story, we can appreciate that we can't treat an entire group of people as a monolith. Where just because I might share certain traits with someone, look a certain way, present a certain way visibly on the outside, I am a unique individual. I'm my own experiences. I'm made up of all of all of the days that led to me being here where I am today. And they will be different. Um, there are those who might have walked a completely different path that may have had a completely different set of influences, may have grown up in completely different places. And they might present with completely fair skin and look as though they should uh, be well versed in Nordic cultures, but they may have, be incredibly soulful and, well versed in all of the, um, you know, various forms of expression that we might associate with African cultures or Caribbean cultures. Thankfully, we live in a time when people can find their bliss. And I think that we're uh, growing toward a time when people can just fully appreciate exploring what it is that lights them up without fear of judgment.
When people can fully express.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming back around to creativity, what are some of the big lessons you've learned in your journey?
I'd say one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn is that there's something to be valued in doing the work, whatever that work is. There's something about getting reps in. I've learned to appreciate that there are a lot of things that I can try my hand at, and I may not be the best, or I could have a completely different experience and have some beginner's luck, have some early success, and the the mastery comes from continuing to do the work, to allow it to feed your soul, to find yourself in what it is that you're doing. It doesn't matter if it was, in my school days when I was playing. Uh, I remember playing brass instruments. Oh, my parents certainly hated um, what it was for me to practice because I was playing a French horn unmuted in a very tiny house, and I was as bad as anyone is when they first start playing for the first 3 years. And I eventually made it to a point where I remember uh, going and playing for a little extra cash, playing a few gigs in town, playing the trumpet and flugelhorn, and um, eventually uh, being able to sub for things. They had me to fill in for a guy in the jazz band playing the drums, and that was definitely an experience for me because you know having played wind instruments for so long, the first time I sat at the set, I was faking it and just trying to make it work. But again, it's all about just doing the work, just sitting down and trying it. A lot of things may seem really hard and impossible, or, just not knowing a way there's that you could actually do something. But it comes down to just being willing to try, just finding the inner courage to dig down and just start and see where it goes.
Well, to perform in bands, you must have developed a certain proficiency for the horn or whatever instrument you
Yeah.
were playing.
Yeah, my principal was the French horn. I started in middle school, played uh, through most of high school, and I loved it. It was it was one of those things I loved so much that I remember it's kind of an expensive thing to pursue. My parents were on board, but my dad told me that I needed to uh, fund the private lessons and all of the expensive things that went along with it. And I went for it. I got a job at the local theme park, and I did all kinds of odd jobs to make it happen. And I remembered the feeling of being able to see that the trajectory, going from it being something that was really hard to something that became a bit more effortless, and building a library of uh, different works that I could draw from, and really enjoying it.
And what happened to the horn? I may have asked you this before, but I don't remember. What happened to the horn?
um, well, I did not at the in my junior year of high school, I had to go to another town, and a lot of my immediate concerns were, just around survival. So I did not have time to pursue music anymore. I tried, but it was just not something I had the time or energy for, because I was pretty much in school or working most of the time and sleeping when I could.
Did you sell the horn?
I did.
Do you ever miss it?
It's one of those things where I can appreciate that that was a chapter. It was a beautiful experience, and it's something I can bond with other people over. A lot of people have had the experience of learning to play an instrument in school, and it's definitely something that is a touchstone that people can relate to.
Mhm. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about community.
Oh, absolutely.
How would you say community has intersected with your creativity?
I would, community is essential for creativity to exist. I have a strong appreciation for how anyone can create anything, but there's a point where the artist has to let go of the work, and the way for it to live is how it's received by those that view it or experience it, eat it, whatever, however it is that they take it in. And it becomes a part of a larger conversation. It becomes something that starts to shape culture. It's something that shifts what it is that people are thinking about, and what's on the collective mind.
And your particular brand of creativity,
Mhm.
Dwight's creativity, how has community played a role in that?
Oh my gosh. Well, like anyone, I know that I need to have some validation that comes from anything that I try. There are a lot of ways, a lot of the things that we do whenever we're bringing people together, the experiment doesn't complete until we see how it lands. We get to see, you know, all of the things that we might plan for an event. They might go well or they might go poorly, but even when they don't go well, there's still some magic in the air and the way that we see that people have had an experience. And there's something that's really special in that.
I agree completely. Well, a lot of your creativity shows up in your workplace, am I correct?
It does. It does.
And although the workplace is a little different animal,
Mhm.
is there an element of of community in there?
Oh, there definitely is. And one of the things that I've been known to get really passionate about is how, uh, in a lot of ways, I know that I am so fortunate to work for a place that allows me to make a difference in, um, well, swim upstream against a tide of growing division and apathy. Um, I I happen to work for people on the front lines in government and in various forms. So if there's something that happens in a courthouse or at a jail, I've probably had some personal experience with the people that are making everything work there. And the thing about it is, those are places where you're going to most likely see people on their worst days, or they're going to be dealing with some of the fallout from the consequences from the worst things that they might have gone through. There are some slight exceptions. You know, you're going to have some people that are going there to get married or to finalize an adoption, but in most cases, someone will have to deal with having been accused of a crime or um, being a part of some civil dispute or having to deal with somehow having to defend themselves publicly for something that they would much rather be private. And a lot of the people that make all of that work have things that they have to do. They have a lot that they have to juggle. And, I'll focus on those that are the least resourced. If we go to any of those small offices that are away from the glamour, the small claims courts in Texas and Georgia, I've worked in both. Generally, what you'll find is the state heaps on a whole bunch of requirements for these offices. Sometimes you just have one person that's supposed to do the same thing that you would have in the larger jurisdictions. The requirements stay the same, but they don't have the staff to be able to make it so people can specialize. So they have to do everything. They have to deal with all of the traffic, the commercial violations, and they have to make sure that the reporting is accurate, it's up to date, and there's a lot that they have to make happen. And I go in and I remember the decade or the more than a decade that I was a consultant, I would be the guy that would go in and say, hey, this stuff that you've had 30 years to get used to. Well, I'm the guy that's representing the company that's making that all go away. And you're going to have to learn a whole new way of doing things because we've got, this is a system that your court bought, that your county bought, your state bought in some cases, and I'm gonna go through it with you, and we'll make it work.
So you were seen sometimes, at least initially, as the bad guy.
Oh my God, there were so many times when people hated me at the beginning, especially, but we would go through the pain of making it work, and I'd stand them up, and we would look at it as an opportunity to figure out, well, why is it we've always done these things? Why can't we do some things that are a little different? And there would be a point usually where they would see, oh, wait, oh, you mean I can do these cool things that make it so that I don't have to go and check every single thing anymore. Like I can batch things and make it to where this is really easy. Oh my gosh. Oh, I became a hero because all of a sudden they went from a place, in their old systems especially, they just push the buttons. They were like, well, I just stamp these things that come across my desk. I don't know what they are. I don't care. And I send them somewhere else. And, a lot of what I did as consultant was just be like a curious child. And I was like, well, why are you doing that? Like, well, what's going on there? Why are you doing that? And they're like, well, I don't know, because I've always done it. Like, what you ask me why 10,000 times. I don't get it. And then when they got to see the pieces come together, they were like, "Oh my God, this stuff is so cool." I had no idea that work could be so much fun. And that always is a moment that I live for with any engagement, where I can get them to see that they have these powerful tools at their disposal and they can do some really impactful things. And they go from, yeah, I mean, you can see it. Uh, in the before, they are just miserable public servants. They're like, just enjoying the benefits, got a lot of holidays, got time with the family, looking at uh, making it to that retirement, and that's it. And when it's over, they're like, oh my gosh, I can do some really cool stuff. This is amazing.
Turned around the way they felt about their daily grind, their job.
Yeah.
Wow. If you could get past the part where they thought you were the villain in the beginning, you had it made, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Every time.
So, Dwight, looking back on all you've experienced and all of the creative aspects of all you've experienced, the challenges you've been through, the life lessons learned, what is your biggest piece of wisdom that you could impart on the listener?
Uh, I would say that there's definitely a true concept that I see repeated in art, that I see and repeated in great works. There's the concept of there being the wheel of fortune. And we have to learn to appreciate that there are going to be times when things are hard, when life is going to be tough. But we get to choose who we get to be in those moments. Those times that we have to experience something that's a little rough, it's building, it's giving you a scar that's going to prepare you and make you more grateful for when things are sweeter.
I love that. Say a little bit more about we get to choose who we are and how we show up.
Yeah, there's definitely an opportunity for you to show up as the one that is going to have an adventure instead of experience a disaster. And I'll just share a quick story where I had a direct experience of that. I remember when I was flying from Dallas to Peoria on a weekly basis. Of course, I had to do this during the springtime when there were tornadoes in both places. And I remember one such trip where I was running to different terminals in DFW to make it to start my work week, because there were rolling flight cancellations. So the endpoint for where I was going to go was winding up farther and farther away from where it was that I was going to work. But I just kept rolling with it. They would cancel each gate, and there were some other travelers that were in the same boat. So we were all doing the same thing. We got to know each other a little bit. And by the end of it, and I think we all wound up flying to Champaign, Urbana. And this is after a whole day of running from terminal to terminal to finally get to actually make it to a flight. And of course, most of us land at a place that's not where we made arrangements. And so we had to figure out how to do the final leg. So what we did when we landed was we got together and rented a van, and we made it so that each of us were dropped off at our respective places so we could resume our trips. I got my rental, and all was good. We had such a great time just dealing with the craziness, just figuring it out. And there's a lens that you could look at that through, where you're just disappointed at everything that happens. Oh my goodness, a delay, a cancellation, another flight canceled. Oh, well, I'm just gonna give up. I'm not even gonna try to go today. You know, you could do
You're
that.
basically describing the universe gives you lemons, so you make lemonade.
Absolutely.
Looking at everything that comes up that's different than what you planned as a potential adventure.
Yes.
I love that. I probably could personally stand to do a little bit more of that. To just think, oh my gosh, the universe has a different plan for me today. I wonder where it's going to take me.
Yeah.
We just had that on Christmas morning. We had a whole plan for Christmas Day. And on
Yeah.
Christmas morning, the electricity went out in our neighborhood for the entire day. There were 9 homes without electricity, and it changed everything we were planning to do. And we just randomly made up a whole new plan, got adventurous, got creative because there's no restaurants hardly open on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Everybody laughs and says, oh, on Christmas Day, it's going to be Chinese. Well, it was. Chinese was
Yeah.
about the only restaurants that were open. We went and had a fabulous Chinese meal and then went to the movies, which is
Yes.
not what we had planned at all. And it ended up being a great day when we just let it be an adventure rather than a disruption.
Yeah. It was perfect.
I get what you're saying. So how this applies to our creative life would be, when we're in creation, we don't always know where creation is going to take us. We have to be willing to flow with creation
That's right.
because
That's right.
rarely does it come out the way you think it's going to come out. I mean, I never ever when I was painting, I never started a painting that I had any idea how it was going to end. Just no way. There was no end game. As a hairdresser, as a makeup artist, there was an end game. You had a picture in your mind before you started that you were trying to achieve. And most of the time, after 40 years of service in the beauty industry, I got really good at achieving the end product. But there's a lot of things that don't work that way. Art is one of them. Now maybe if, I don't know, maybe, the statue of David, he knew exactly what he wanted when he started carving that stone. I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But a lot of times, um, the medium takes us on a journey.
It does.
And that's the beautiful part. That was the hard part for me. After 40 years of having an end game before I started, that was the hard part for me. But I always knew that if I could let go and just start putting paint on the canvas and moving it around, that it would take me someplace interesting.
Hmm. It's funny. I think about how we've covered a lot of interesting ground here, but there's a big part of my story that we haven't touched at all. And I think you know exactly where I'm going. Uh, what I experienced during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a story for another day.
Yeah.
Another episode at some point, or it'll be woven into our episodes with featured guests. Yes, you have a lot more, and I do too. We both have a lot more stories to tell, and there's plenty of time to do that.
Yeah. So
Or at least we hope there is.
nothing's promised, but I'm not planning on going anywhere.
No, nothing's promised. You are correct. This has been awesome. I've really enjoyed getting to ask you the questions and hearing your answers, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy it equally.
Yeah, this has been great. I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Me too.